Cheatles, her boss asked her out right in front of me. She said yes. She had no idea what was coming. Miniatura. HR boss invited her to dinner while staring me down. She said yes without blinking. I walked out and spent 11 months making sure she'd never forget that night. If this story hits close to home, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. My name is Daniel Hargrove. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent the last 2 decades as a patent attorney, intellectual property, contract law, the kind of work that requires you to anticipate threats before they arrive and neutralize them before they escalate. It's a peculiar profession. You spend your career building walls around other people's ideas, constructing legal frameworks, mi pareja, airtight, that even the most aggressive challenger walks away with nothing. I was good at it, very good. The bitter irony I've carried for years is that I could protect a stranger's patent against the sharpest lawyers in the country, but I couldn't see my own marriage dissolving beneath my feet until it had already turned to dust. The night everything unraveled started the way these nights always do, unremarkably. My wife Catherine's company was holding its annual recognition dinner. She'd been their director of marketing for 6 years, a relentless climber who thrived in rooms like the one we walked into that evening, a downtown hotel ballroom with vaulted ceilings, crystal light fixtures, and a crowd dressed in the kind of money that announces itself without trying. Catherine moved through it naturally. She always had. That particular ease, that magnetic warmth she turned on like a switch in professional settings, was one of the first things I'd fallen for when we met 23 years ago. I stood near the bar, holding a whiskey I wasn't really drinking, watching her work the room the way she always did. Proud of her, genuinely. Even after years of eating dinner alone 3 nights a week, even after our conversations had narrowed into logistics, mortgage payments, school calendars, whose car needed servicing, I'd told myself that was just the rhythm of 2 busy people. I'd told myself a lot of things. That's when Richard Stanton appeared beside her, CEO, 52 years old, silver hair, tailored suit, one of those watches that costs more than a family car. The kind of man who moves through every room as though it has been arranged specifically for his arrival. I'd met him twice before at company functions. Both times, something about the way he looked at my wife produced a tightness in my jaw I couldn't quite explain. They spoke for a few minutes. I was 20 feet away, close enough to watch but not to hear. I saw him lean in slightly. I saw Catherine tilt her head. That particular angle she uses when she's genuinely charmed by someone. A small, unconscious tell I'd learned to read over 2 decades. Then something shifted. He turned, looked directly at me, not a glance, a deliberate, sustained look, the kind that communicates something clearly without requiring words. He held my gaze across the length of the ballroom. Then he spoke at a volume that carried precisely as far as he intended it to. Dinner tomorrow, just the 2 of us. We should talk about your next move. I watched Catherine's face, the flicker of something, surprise first, and then, a fraction of a second later, something colder. Calculation. She glanced at me once, barely half a second, then back at him. That sounds perfect, she said. And she smiled. He had looked straight at me when he said it. She had answered without hesitation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move toward them. I didn't make any gesture at all. I set my glass on the nearest table with the same care I use when filing a document I intend to reference later. Then I turned and walked out of that ballroom, my footsteps echoing across the marble lobby as I pushed through the main doors into the night air. Nobody followed me. I sat in my car in the parking structure for 10 minutes. Engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. The lawyer in me was already working, not from emotion but from analysis. Clear-eyed, deliberate, methodical. Richard had made a power play. Catherine had accepted it in plain sight. And somewhere in the accumulated weight of that evening, a decision I'd been circling for nearly a year quietly resolved itself. My phone lit up. Text from Catherine. "Where did you go?" I didn't answer. I started the car and drove home. Our house was in a neighborhood called Millhaven Terrace, The kind of street where every lawn is maintained with obsessive regularity and every garage door goes up at the same hour every morning, as though the whole block agreed on a schedule. I pulled in at 11:47 p.m. The house was dark except for the porch light Catherine always left on. I didn't go inside immediately. I sat in the dim quiet of the garage, listening to the engine cool, and I made a decision. Not the emotional kind, the strategic kind. The kind I'd make for a client facing a hostile acquisition. If she came home that night and carried on as though nothing had happened, I would know exactly where I stood. And if I knew where I stood, I knew exactly what needed to happen next. What I want you to understand is that the plan I activated that night hadn't been built in anger. It had been constructed slowly, carefully, over 11 months, not because I'd been planning a revenge, but because I am someone who prepares for contingencies. Every agreement I'd had Catherine sign, every asset I'd restructured, every legal position I'd taken over the previous year, each one had seemed ordinary at the time. Estate planning, tax efficiency, asset protection. She'd signed every document. She'd done it while checking her phone, barely pausing, trusting me completely because I was her husband and I handled the complicated paperwork, and there was no conceivable reason not to. That trust, the absolute unquestioned trust of someone who has stopped paying attention, was about to become the most expensive thing she had ever given away for free. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I locked myself in my home office and spent 4 hours reviewing every document I'd prepared over the previous 11 months. The deed she'd signed the previous April, transferring the house into a trust I controlled. The pension reallocation from June, separating our joint retirement funds into individual accounts, hers redirected into a charitable structure I administered, the business entity formations, the carefully worded legal releases, every one of them perfectly legal, every one of them notarized, witnessed, and on record. At 2:47 in the morning, I pulled up the spreadsheet I'd been maintaining. The house, sole ownership transferred, the investment accounts restructured and separated, her pension contributions rerouted into a charitable trust with access controlled exclusively by me. Our joint checking account. I'd been moving funds into accounts she didn't know existed for months, small increments, nothing dramatic, all of it defensible. I heard the garage door at 1:15 a.m., Catherine's heels on the tile floor. She called my name twice. I didn't respond. I listened to her climb the stairs, heard the bedroom door close. Then I went back to my spreadsheet. At 6 in the morning, I showered, changed into running clothes, and packed a bag. 3 days of clothing, my laptop, an external hard drive with encrypted backups of everything I needed. I left the house keys on the kitchen counter, the garage remote beside them, the spare car key she'd need, and an envelope, no letter inside, just documents. The ones that outlined exactly what she'd signed, what she'd authorized, and what she no longer had access to. I took one long look around the house where we'd spent 12 years. The kitchen where we'd hosted dinners that I now understood had been more about her professional networking than anything domestic. The living room where our daughter Lily had learned to walk, holding on to the edge of the coffee table, looking up at both of us with the absolute trust that only very young children are capable of. The life I'd built that Catherine had traded for a dinner invitation and a promotion. My phone was already off, SIM card removed and destroyed. I had a new one, prepaid, untraceable, registered to a name that didn't connect back to me in any searchable database. I'd spent months preparing the infrastructure, email accounts, cloud storage, a VPN that masked my location. Lily was the only variable that genuinely troubled me. She was 22, out of college, working in Seattle. I'd called her the day before, told her I loved her, asked about her new apartment, said nothing about what was coming. I couldn't risk Catherine reaching her first, shaping the story before I'd had a chance to give her the truth. I'd handle that, just not yet. I left through the front door at 6:33 in the morning. The sky was going orange at the edges. 3 blocks away, parked on a residential street, was a gray Toyota registered to an LLC Catherine knew nothing about. 5 years old, unremarkable in every possible way. By 7, I was on the interstate heading north. No fixed destination, just distance. Just the first step of a plan 11 months in the making. A calendar reminder appeared on my new phone. I'd set it for this exact morning, day 1. That's precisely what it was. 3 days later, I was in a motel room outside Portland, watching my old life come apart on a laptop screen. Months earlier, I'd set up monitoring software with access to our home security system, our bank accounts, and Catherine's email address. All of it legal, all of it my right as a joint account holder and the man who'd installed the security system himself. Now I watched her panic in something close to real time. She called everyone, my office, my parents, Lily, an old college friend she'd probably lost track of years ago. I knew every call she made because I'd configured forwarding on her shared contacts. Every email she sent, I read. She filed a missing persons report on day 2. The police told her what I'd anticipated they would. I was an adult who had left voluntarily. No evidence of harm, no crime. My phone rang. My attorney, Michael Crane, a law school friend who'd been part of the planning since the beginning. "She's hired counsel," Michael said. "Patricia Vance, family law, expensive and aggressive." "Good," I said. I meant it. "How long before she figures out there's nothing to challenge?" "A week, maybe less." "Daniel, you built this clean. Every signature is legitimate. Every transfer has documentation. The trust is locked. She cannot access the pension. She cannot touch the investment accounts. The deed transfer stands." "And Lily." A pause. "Your daughter has been calling my office. She wants to know what's happening. I told her I couldn't discuss it without your authorization." I closed my eyes. Lily was the one clean thing in all of this. The one person in the entire situation who deserved none of what was coming for her. "I'll reach out," I said. "Not yet." "Cole." "Daniel, how far are you taking this?" "All the way." She made her decision, Michael. She chose dinner with her boss over 20 years of marriage. She made that choice while I was standing 15 yards away. All I'm doing is making sure she understands what that decision cost. I'd set up alerts on the shared cloud storage, a folder Catherine thought I'd forgotten about, where we'd backed up documents years ago. 2 weeks after I left, she uploaded a scan of our mortgage papers, probably trying to assess whether she could refinance without me. That's when she would have found it, the deed. Her signature on page 3, dated 11 months prior. Sole ownership transferred to me. I imagined the moment of recognition, the way it would land. My phone rang. "Michael." "She knows," he said. "Vance called me this morning. They want to challenge the deed transfer. Fraud, duress. They're arguing you misrepresented the purpose." I laughed, not the warm kind. "She signed it with a notary present. The notary will confirm she was of sound mind and acting willingly. There's no fraud." "That's what I told Vance. She's grasping, Daniel. Catherine is desperate." "Good. Let her be desperate. What else?" "She tried to access the joint investment account. Found out it's been restructured. She's locked out, as intended." "This is going to get ugly." "Michael, it's already ugly. She just wasn't paying attention until now." Remember that in the description and in the pinned comment you have all our supplements, from fitness to health in every sense of the word. Take care of yourself the way I took care of my future. I'd rented a cabin in Washington State, cash up front, 3 months paid in advance. The owner was a weathered man in his 60s named Walt, who didn't ask questions, didn't offer opinions, and handed me a key as though strangers paying cash for remote cabins was the most ordinary thing in the world. The mountains here were enormous, the kind of landscape that makes human drama feel appropriately small. I'd been there a week and I already slept better than I had in years. No performance required. No wondering whether the woman beside me actually saw me or was simply accustomed to my presence the way you become accustomed to furniture. An email arrived from Lily, angrier than the last one. "Dad, Mom showed me the paperwork. She says you tricked her. She says you took everything. How could you do this and just disappear? I thought I knew who you were." Catherine had started working on her. I'd expected it. That didn't make it easier. I wrote back carefully. Emma, Lily, your mother signed legal documents on multiple occasions. I didn't coerce her. I described each document accurately at the time of signing. She chose not to read them carefully. That is not deception. It's inattention. Ask her about Richard Stanton. Ask her about the dinner. Ask her why I walked out that night. Then decide for yourself who's telling you the complete version. I hesitated before sending it. Was I drawing my daughter into the middle of something she shouldn't have to navigate? Yes, but Catherine had fired that shot first. If she intended to use Lily as leverage, I was going to make sure Lily had access to the actual facts. 3 days later, a single line came back. I asked her about Stanton. She wouldn't answer. Dad, what's really happening? Progress, small but unambiguous. I wrote back with the truth. Calibrated, specific, honest without being designed to wound. The awards ceremony. The invitation, the way Catherine had said yes while her husband stood within earshot. My decision to stop waiting for someone who had, in every meaningful sense, already left years before that night. I didn't steal anything, Lily. I protected myself from someone who stopped valuing me, mi pareja. Long ago she'd forgotten to notice when it happened. I am sorry you're in the middle of this, but I will not apologize for finally refusing to be invisible. The following Tuesday, Walt knocked on my cabin door holding an envelope. Woman dropped this off, he said, handing it over. Didn't leave a name. The envelope was expensive, heavy paper stock. Catherine's handwriting across the front. I opened it after Walt left. A single page. You win. I'll sign whatever you need. Just give me something. The house, at least, for Lily. Please. I read it twice. Then I carried it to the fireplace, struck a match, and held the corner to the flame until the paper caught. She still didn't understand. This wasn't about winning. This was about consequences. She had spent years making me invisible, dismissing, overlooking, treating my presence as background noise in the story of her own ambitions. Now she was experiencing what true invisibility actually felt like, and she wanted to negotiate her way back to a version where she kept the house and the outcome she'd been used to. I wasn't negotiating. 6 weeks after I walked out, Richard Stanton's company imploded. I hadn't caused it, not directly, but as a patent attorney who tracks intellectual property litigation as a professional habit, I'd been watching the situation develop for months. Stanton Technologies had been locked in litigation with an overseas firm over stolen trade secrets. The case had been public record for anyone who knew where to look. I'd been following it since the previous year. The judgment came down on a Tuesday morning. $62 million in damages. Stanton Technologies filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection within 72 hours. I read the news alert sitting in Walt's cabin with my coffee going cold in my hand. Richard Stanton was quoted describing it as a temporary setback. The company's stock price, down 81% in a single trading session, said otherwise. Michael called an hour later. You're watching this. Hard to miss. She's going to lose the job, Daniel. If the company folds, there's no severance and bankruptcy. Not my problem anymore. Lily called my office again. She said Catherine is barely functioning. I walked to the window. The mountains outside were indifferent, which was appropriate. What does she want me to do? Maybe just let Catherine know you're not trying to dismantle her completely. I'm not trying to dismantle her at all. I'm simply not protecting her from the consequences of her own choices anymore. There's a meaningful difference between those two things. I pulled up the monitoring software after hanging up. Catherine's email showed 3 messages sent to Richard Stanton, all marked urgent. None had been answered. She'd also submitted her resume to 4 competitor firms, companies that would have full visibility into the Stanton Technologies scandal. Her prospects in that industry were not good. Then I saw the email from her attorney to Catherine. Vance had written clearly and without softening. Given your current financial position and the bankruptcy, I have to advise that we settle. Continuing to fight this will cost more than you could ever recover. He has everything documented, every signature, every transfer date, every legal justification. I'm sorry, but there is no viable case to pursue. Catherine's response had come an hour later. Then what do I do? Just accept that I have nothing. Vance's reply was 3 words. You kept nothing. I should have felt vindicated. I felt hollow instead. 20 years compressed into legal documentation and financial maneuvering. A woman I had genuinely loved, scrambling to survive while her boss ignored her calls and her own attorney recommended surrender. The hollowness lasted about as long as it took me to remember that night. Richard looking at me. Catherine saying yes. The casual, effortless cruelty of being erased in a room full of people who were watching. The hollow feeling passed. My phone rang. Lily. The first time she'd called directly since I left. Dad. Her voice was controlled in the way that takes work. We need to talk. I know. Mom's in trouble. She lost her job. She can't pay the mortgage. The house is going to go to foreclosure. The house is in my name, Lily. It's not going anywhere. Dad, she's living there with no income. You've made your point. This has gone far enough. I stood up and walked to the window. The mountains didn't change. Has it? From where I'm standing, your mother still hasn't understood what she actually did wrong. She thinks I'm retaliating over one dinner invitation. She doesn't see the years of being invisible, of being the person in the room that everyone talks around. Then explain it to her. You don't have to destroy her to explain it. I'm not destroying her, Lily. I'm just not standing between her and the results of her own decisions. That's not cruelty. That's simply the absence of rescue. Silence. Then, when are you coming home? I'm not going back to that version of home. Not to being the man nobody registers. Mi pareja, what happens to Mom? She figures out how to stand on her own. The same way I had to figure out how to exist in a marriage where I'd become invisible. She's capable. She's smart. She'll survive. That's cold, Dad. No, sweetheart. Cold is agreeing to dinner with another man while your husband is standing close enough to hear every word. I'm just done performing warmth for someone who treated me like background. A long pause. Then, quietly, I love you, but I don't like you very much right now. That's fair, I said. I can live with that. The line went quiet. I sat back down and stared at my phone for a long time after. She wasn't entirely wrong. Maybe I had extended this further than necessary, but I had spent 20 years not extending it far enough, not standing up, not demanding to be acknowledged, not requiring anything from the person who was supposed to see me better than anyone else. I opened the mortgage account. 60 days overdue. Foreclosure proceedings would begin at 90. I transferred exactly enough to bring it current, not $1 more. Then I sent a message to Catherine through a clean account. The house is paid. You won't lose it, but I'm not going to let you ignore what happened indefinitely. When you can acknowledge the truth, without deflection, without reframing me as the villain, we can have a conversation. Until then, learn what it takes to stand on your own. I've been doing it for years. I closed the laptop. Walt knocked 20 minutes later, carrying a bottle of whiskey. You look like a man who needs this, he said. I took it. That obvious. Son, I've been divorced 3 times. I know that particular expression from the inside. He sat on the porch, uninvited but genuinely not unwelcome. You running from something or toward something? At this point, I said, I honestly don't know anymore. He took a long pull from the bottle and handed it back. Here's what an old man who's made most of the available mistakes can tell you. There's a real difference between those 2 things. Running away is just postponing. Running toward something takes a specific kind of nerve. Make sure you know which one you're doing before you use up all your distance. I took the bottle back. What if you don't know yet what you're running toward? Then you figure it out. But you figure it out by living in it, not by hiding in a rented cabin until the answer arrives. 3 months after leaving, I heard my story on a podcast. Not my name, just the outline. a men's discussion channel called something I'd never heard of before the algorithm surfaced it for me after months of searching asset protection law online. The episode was titled something about silence as a form of strategy. Two hosts dissecting a case they'd heard circulating in certain online spaces. The corporate event, the CEO's invitation, the wife who said yes, the husband who walked away without a word, and, when I say disappeared, one of them said, I mean he had legally restructured his entire financial life before he left. This guy was operating 3 moves ahead the entire time. They had details, not names, but details. The deed transfer, the pension structure, the trust. Someone had leaked it, probably from the attorney's office, or possibly Catherine herself, searching for sympathy online and not understanding who might be listening. The comments had fractured into 2 camps, thousands of men describing similar experiences, calling what I'd done the only move that made sense. Thousands of others calling it calculated abuse, emotional terrorism, sociopathic behavior. I sat in my truck outside a grocery store in Washington and listened to strangers argue about whether I was someone worth respecting or someone worth fearing. What struck me was that I felt like neither. I just felt tired. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text. Is this the person from that podcast? People are calling you a legend. Others are calling you a monster. I just want to know if my husband is famous. Catherine, she'd traced the anonymous mortgage email somehow. Probably paid someone to run it down. I stared at the message for several minutes. Then I typed, I'm not famous. I'm just done being invisible. There's a distinction. Her response came immediately. Can we meet? Just once. Just to talk. I almost said no, almost blocked the number and drove away. But something, not nostalgia exactly, more like the last functional remnant of 20 years, made me pause. One meeting, I typed back. Neutral location. You come alone. We talk. Nothing more. I'll set the time when I'm ready. I didn't set a time, because I wasn't ready yet. But the possibility now existed. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness. Just 2 people who had once known each other well, trying to understand how it had all gone mi pareja completely wrong. Remember that in the description and in the pinned comment you have all our supplements, from fitness to health, in every sense of the word. Take care of yourself the way I learned to take care of my future. 5 months after I left, an email arrived in one of my secure accounts. The sender was a literary agent in New York, a woman named Claire Ashworth. Mr. Hargrove, she wrote, I've been following the discussion around your situation through several podcast networks. I believe there is a book here, not a revenge account, but an honest record of what happens when someone finally stops accepting their own erasure. I'd like to discuss representation. Are you interested? I sat with the email for 20 minutes before I did anything else. A book, my story, told in my own voice, not filtered through podcast hosts with agendas or comment sections with axes to grind. A chance to explain, precisely and completely, what had actually happened, rather than what people had decided must have happened. I called Michael first. Legally, it's clean, he said, as long as you're not defaming Catherine or disclosing privileged legal information. Personally, that's a call only you can make. But Daniel, once you publish, you stop being a ghost. You become a public figure. There's no going back from that. Maybe that's the point, I said. Maybe hiding isn't actually moving forward. I set up a call with Claire for the following day. She was direct, efficient, and genuinely uninterested in sensation. What compels me, she said, is not the tactics. It's the question underneath them. Why do mi pareja, many men, reach the point where disappearing feels like the only available option? That's the story. That's what people need to hear. The deal came together quickly, a meaningful advance, publication scheduled for 8 months out. The title she proposed was clean and precise. The Exit Strategy, When Silence Becomes Power. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt exposed. Writing meant revealing everything. The methodical planning, the years of accumulated hurt, The deliberate dismantling of a life I'd spent 2 decades constructing alongside someone who had, somewhere along the way, stopped noticing I was there. It meant Lily would read it. My parents would read it. Catherine would read it. But Walt's words hadn't left me, running toward something, not just away. Maybe this was it. I called Lily before I signed anything. She deserved to hear it from me directly. "I'm writing a book," I said, "about your mother, about the marriage, about what happened. I wanted you to know before anyone else." Silence. Then, "Dad, haven't you already done enough? The podcast, the blogs, now a book. When does it end? When people stop assuming I'm either a hero or a cautionary tale and start understanding that I'm just someone who got tired of being invisible. And you think a book accomplishes that? I think it's the only way my side of the story exists somewhere besides the comment section." She was quiet for a while. Then, "Will you let me read it before it goes out?" "Every word." "Okay." A pause. "But Dad, when this comes out, you can't hide anymore. You'll have to face all of it." "I know," I said. "I think I'm ready." I started writing that night. Not the book yet. Notes, memories, the early years of the marriage, before Catherine's ambition consumed the available oxygen in every room she entered. Before I became furniture. The good years, before they stopped. Walt stopped by that evening and found me surrounded by notes and empty coffee cups. "Working or punishing yourself?" he asked. "Writing a book." He raised both eyebrows. "About how you got here. About all of it." "That's moving forward," he said. "Just make sure you're not writing your way back into the past. Build something new with it, not just a record of what happened." After he left, I sat on the porch and watched the sun go down behind the mountains. What did I actually want? Not Catherine back. That version of us had been dead long before I admitted it. Not vindication exactly. I wanted to be seen, genuinely. Not as a salary, not as a stable presence, not as the reliable background figure that kept the household functioning. As a person with a specific weight and a specific voice and something worth saying. The book would do that. But beyond the book, I needed to understand who Daniel Hargrove was now. Not the husband, not the attorney who vanished. Someone new, someone constructed on different principles. I picked up my phone and texted Claire, "I'm in, let's build this." Her reply came in under a minute. "Good, the world is ready for this. Let's show them what it looks like when silence stops being weakness and becomes something else entirely." The meeting Catherine had asked for happened 5 months after I'd agreed to it. She found me through the book deal. My name had appeared in a publishing industry announcement, and she'd had someone track it back to a location. She drove to Washington and showed up at Walt's property without warning. I was splitting wood when her car appeared at the end of the dirt road. She got out slowly, the way a person approaches something they're not sure won't hurt them. "Cole," she said. My old nickname, not the name I'd been using. Then she corrected, "Daniel." "Sorry." I set the axe down and wiped my face with my sleeve. "Catherine, you look different. I am different. Can we talk?" I gestured toward the porch. We sat on opposite ends of it, the space between us dense with everything that hadn't been said for the better part of a year. "I read about the book," she said. "A contact forwarded me the trade announcement. I assumed you'd see it coming." "I did. Are you going to destroy me in it?" "I'm going to tell the truth. If the truth destroys you, that tells you something about the truth." Her jaw tightened. "I came here to ask you to stop. I have nothing left. The job is gone. Whatever savings I had are drained. Richard won't pick up my calls. Online, I'm a cautionary tale in other people's posts. Isn't that sufficient?" "This isn't about sufficient, Catherine. This is about making sure there's a complete record, told by someone who was actually present, not just the version that circulates without my voice in it. I was present too." "Were you? Because from where I stood, you hadn't been truly present in our marriage for years. You were physically in the room, but you had left long before that ceremony." She looked away. Something in the composed surface slipped. "I made a mistake. One mistake. I said yes to a dinner that meant nothing. I got caught up in the moment." That dinner was just the visible part of something much longer. What about the anniversaries you forgot because a client dinner ran late? The conversations where I could watch you look straight through me like I wasn't solid? The 3 times over 2 years that I asked if we could go to counseling and you told me you were too busy? The vacation I suggested and you couldn't take time off for? The 1 dinner a week I asked for and you told me your schedule was too unpredictable? She looked at me without speaking. I tried, Catherine. 3 separate times over 2 years I said something directly. And each time I did, I got a schedule conflict in return. Mi pareja, eventually I stopped asking. And since asking wasn't producing anything except more evidence that I didn't register, I started preparing, because that was the only thing left that I had control over. She sat down again, the fight going out of her all at once. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. What do you want from me? She asked finally, smaller, quieter. An apology? Acknowledgement? Do you want me to beg? 5 months ago, I wanted my wife to see me, to choose me, or at least to not choose her boss over me in public, in front of a room full of her colleagues while I was standing close enough to hear. That's all I ever wanted, to matter, to be worth noticing. You mattered. Not more than the promotion, not more than what Stanton was offering. And that's what I'm writing about. Not revenge, not punishment, just the straightforward truth that I spent 20 years being invisible to the person who promised to see me. She stood up. The composure finally gave way. Tears she'd been controlling throughout the conversation arrived all at once, honest and unwilled. I'm sorry, she said. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. I believe you, I said. But an apology doesn't revise what happened, it just acknowledges it. She walked to her car, paused with her hand on the door. The book. Will it be fair? It'll be honest, I said. That's the only promise I can make. She drove away. I watched until her car disappeared behind the tree line. Then I picked up the axe and went back to work. Each swing felt like cutting through something that had needed cutting for a long time. Walt appeared an hour later. She leave, okay? He asked. She left. You get what you needed? I got to say what I should have said years ago. That's worth something. Son, Walt said. That's not worth something. That's worth everything. 8 months after I left, Lily called on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice had a steadiness to it that I recognized as something prepared. Dad, I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I'm changing my name, legally. I'm dropping Mom's maiden name from the hyphenated version, just going with Hargrove. I sat down very carefully. Lily had been Lily Hargrove Mills since birth. This was not a small gesture. You don't have to do that, I said. I know I don't have to. That's why I'm doing it, not because I hate Mom, not to hurt her, but because you were the one who showed up. Every single time I needed someone, you were there. Every school event, every bad week, every phone call at 11 at night when I didn't know what to do. She was at work, you were there. I'm 22 years old, and I'm finally seeing clearly what you saw years before I did. Your mother loves you, Lily. I know she does, but loving someone and showing up for them aren't always the same thing. You taught me that. Not with words, with everything you actually did. After the call ended, I sat on Walt's porch as the evening settled over the mountains. My daughter had made her own judgment, not because I'd asked her to, not because I'd positioned her, because she had watched everything unfold and arrived at her own conclusion. The book released 2 weeks later. It hit the bestseller list within days. The responses were split, predictably. Some reviewers called it a necessary examination of emotional neglect and the costs of invisibility in long-term relationships. Others called it an abandonment manual, a blueprint for financial manipulation dressed up as self-actualization. But people were reading it. People were talking about it. And for the first time in a very long time, my voice was in the conversation. Catherine sent me an email 3 days after publication. I read it, all of it. You were right about more than I was prepared to admit. I'm sorry it took complete collapse for me to understand what I'd been doing. I sat with that email for 3 days before I answered. I'm glad you read it. I'm glad you acknowledged it. I hope you find what you're actually looking for. It won't be with me, But I hope you find it. Lily called the following week with news. Mom got a position at a nonprofit in Portland, marketing coordinator. It's a 70% pay cut, but she seems different. Quieter. More, I don't know, present. That's something, I said. I'm glad she's building something. She asked me to pass along a question. She wants to know if you'd be willing to meet her one more time. Not to fix anything. Just for real closure, not the angry kind. I thought about it for a moment. Tell her yes. 3 months from now, when the book tour is done and things have settled. Tell her I'll reach out. The advance from the book had changed the material shape of things considerably. I'd cleared every outstanding debt, established a trust for Lily's long-term security, made a meaningful donation to organizations working on men's mental health. The rest I'd invested carefully, building something sustainable rather than spectacular. I'd also started teaching business law at a small college 40 minutes from the cabin. Contracts, intellectual property, asset protection. Not as tactics for retaliation, but as essential life literacy that nobody thinks to acquire until they need it desperately and it's already too late. One of my students, a young man named Ethan, stopped me after class one afternoon. Professor Hargrove, are you actually the person from that book, The Exit Strategy? I used to be that person, I said. Now I'm someone who teaches law and tries to make sure people don't find themselves unprepared when something important is on the line. That's pretty remarkable, he said. My parents divorced last year. My dad lost everything in the settlement. I wish he'd known what you knew. Tell him it's never too late to start again, I said. And tell him that being seen by himself matters more than being seen by someone who stopped looking. That conversation stayed with me for a long time. Maybe that was the actual point of all of it. Not vindication, not the destruction of anyone. Just demonstrating that you could leave with your dignity intact, that protecting yourself wasn't weakness, that the moment you stopped accepting invisibility was the moment you started existing in full. The meeting with Catherine happened on a bench at the Portland waterfront, 2 years and 3 months after I walked out of that awards ceremony. She was already there when I arrived, both hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup, looking smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just less armored. Daniel, she said as I sat down. Catherine. We watched the river for a moment. The ordinary world moved around us. Joggers, tourists, a group of children on a school trip, moving in a loose pack along the promenade. Life in full continuation, indifferent to private histories. Thank you for coming, she said. I've been in therapy. Real therapy, not venting to friends, not processing through work. Actual structured work. My therapist helped me understand something I'd been avoiding for a long time. She looked at the river. I used professional achievement as a way to avoid genuine intimacy. Every late night, every promotion, every time I chose the office over home, I was running from the vulnerability of actually being in a relationship. Because intimacy requires being seen, and being seen means you can be hurt. I nodded slowly. Control felt safer. Being the director, being impressive, being in charge of outcomes, that felt safe. Being your wife, genuinely, with all that entails, that terrified me. And I'm sorry, not because I got caught, because of what I actually did, because I treated you like furniture for years while you were standing right there being a person. Those words, the ones I'd needed 2 years earlier, they arrived differently now, not healing, not repairing, but genuine. Acknowledged rather than denied. That means something, I said. Thank you. She smiled, sad and specific. Emma talks about you all the time. The teaching, the book. She's proud of you. She should be, I said. She earned her own clarity. I didn't arrange that. She talks about me too, Catherine said. Says I'm different now. Honest assessment, broke and humbled, has a way of reconfiguring your entire operating system. She looked at the river again. I make $48,000 a year at a nonprofit. I drive a used car. I rent a studio apartment. I'm genuinely happier than I was at 6 figures. My therapist told me I'd find that disorienting. She was right, but I can look at myself without having to manage what I see. That's worth whatever it cost to get here. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. handed it to me. What's this? Final divorce papers. I signed them. No lawyers, no contested assets, no extended process. Just an acknowledgement of what ended and when. You don't owe me anything, and I stopped pretending you do. I opened the envelope. Everything signed. Nothing retained except the right to move forward. You didn't have to do this, I said. Yes, Primera did. You deserve to be completely free, Daniel, and I needed to stop fighting a battle I lost before it started. I signed the papers there on the bench, the river moving past in front of us, the ordinary world doing its ordinary things. Catherine stood up. I hope you find someone who sees you, she said. Someone who doesn't need you to disappear before they notice you're there. You deserve that. I hope you find real peace, I said. Not just the absence of drama, the actual thing. She walked away. I sat with the signed papers in my lap and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not repair, release. The specific sensation of something finally being put down. My phone buzzed. Lily, how did it go? It went well. It's over. Actually over. Good. Love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart. I stood up and walked along the waterfront, the papers folded under my arm, the sky going gold at the edges above Mount Hood in the distance. 2 years earlier, I had walked out of a hotel ballroom and driven into complete uncertainty. I had dismantled the life I knew, disappeared into the mountains of Washington State, rebuilt myself piece by piece from the ground up, not out of cruelty, not out of calculation for its own sake, but because I had finally understood that being seen begins with refusing to be invisible. The book had reached the Times bestseller list. I'd been on podcasts, morning programs, eventually a talk on self-respect and the language of healthy boundaries that had found an audience I hadn't anticipated. People called me an inspiration. Others called me a cautionary tale. I was neither. I was just a man who decided that his presence was not optional, that his voice had weight, that being taken for granted was not the same thing as being loved. Walt had passed away 4 months earlier. Heart attack, fast, painless, in the morning before the day had started. At his funeral, his daughter pulled me aside. Dad always said you reminded him of who he was at your age, she told me. He said you had the sense to leave before the bitterness settled in permanently. He respected that about you. I'd kept the cabin. I used it as a writing retreat. The second book was almost finished. Not about the marriage, not about the tactics, but about the space between an ending and a beginning. About what it takes to cross that distance without losing yourself in it. As I walked back toward my car, I passed a young couple on a bench near the river. The woman was on her phone. The man was talking. She wasn't listening. I recognized the look on his face, the particular patience of someone who has been saying the same things for me pareja long, that the saying of them has become reflexive, automatic, no longer expected to land. I didn't stop. It wasn't my place. Everyone has to find their own line, their own moment, where the cost of invisibility finally exceeds the cost of change. I got in my car and drove north toward Washington, toward the teaching and the writing and the work of showing up fully in a life that was, for the first time in longer than I could measure, actually mine. 2 years ago, I had left everything behind. Now I had something better, not a perfect life, an honest one. A life where my presence had weight, where I was seen not because I demanded it, but because I had finally stopped accepting anything less. Where the people around me knew exactly who I was because I had stopped performing a version of myself designed to go unnoticed. That, in the end, was worth every calculated step that had led here. And if you've been feeling invisible in your own life, if you've been waiting for someone to finally see you and the waiting has started to feel like its own kind of vanishing, leave a comment below. I'd like to know your story.